This is Linux In-Laws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever else fancies your tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy, Mum? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back on a speaker in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35, or any pets, including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusted guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs.
Welcome to Linux In-Laws, Season 1, Episode 70. Martin, how are things?
Chris, things are still sunny. It's amazing.
Well, you are in the UK, right? So
in the UK, yes.
Spot the flaws in the picture.
Flaws in the picture. Yes, Greta, if you're listening, we need more of the warmth, please.
Greta, disregard that remark. We're just going to move the UK about 2 centimeters to the south. And that should do the trick nicely.
That's not a bad idea, yes. Excellent plan. Let's do that.
But you would have to get approval from Charlie first, no? Given the fact that he's not in charge of things.
Well, I think actually the UK is moving to the west continuously anyway, by a significant amount every year, but not quite south. So if you wait long enough, we'll end up being attached to the US.
Okay, rather than France.
That may take a few billion years.
I see. Wouldn't France be the easier option because it's nearer? And they have better wine anyway.
Well, that's debatable, actually. The American wines are quite drinkable these days. Yeah.
Do you think so?
Yeah,
okay. Never mind the fact that France has a longer tradition of doing quality wines.
Well, they speak a different language there than in the US, at least they.
This is what they claim, Martin. Whether that's true, that's a matter of debate too.
and on average, they eat, one French person eats 4 frogs a year. There you go.
That's way too little, isn't it? That's way too little, no? French people, if you're listening, eat more frogs. But don't tell Greta because she'll easily get upset, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
And don't be harmed by any bloody pictures that somebody made up in America with frogs in wheelchairs, so no sweat. They're all lies anyway. The email address, dear frog producer company is sponsor at linuxinlaws.eu. Just get in touch and we'll sort you out. Anyway, but this is not a podcast about frogs, but rather about something else.
No, we've done sticky insects already.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Martin, what are we going to What are we going to talk about today?
Oh, today. We haven't covered the politics, but we can do that another time. That's fine.
We don't
really do weather.
Charlie.
I guess, yeah, Charlie and the French.
Should we mention what's her name again? Truss.
We can mention her. We just did. There we go. That's politics covered.
Okay. Sorted, Martin. Sorted.
Right, so now to the subject of today, which is why to compile code.
Why do we need a compiler? That's a good question, isn't it? Let's go back to the olden days.
And who uses one these days?
Indeed. Martin,
the olden days?
Yes.
Olden days.
Martin,
how far are we talking?
No, bear with me. Martin, when you were buying your first car, you were still using these paper punch cards, right? If you wanted to program that big 370 series computer.
No, I had a car before I went to uni. So no
so
paper tape was involved at the time, yeah.
So that makes it ENIAC or whatever? That makes it ENIAC, as in Charlie after the Second World War?
No. My first computer was a... Well, if you don't
370?
if you don't count the Ataris and stuff like that, the thing that played Pong or whatever it was called.
That was it wasn't a relay-based machine, but it was a tube-based machine back in the 50s. Martin,
Yes.
I didn't know
Anyway.
that they were that old.
Going back to my first computer, that's probably a VIC-20, yeah.
Okay.
Made by Commodore.
Yes.
Whatever happened to them?
They got acquired, I reckon,
By
and
who?
details may or not be in the show notes.
Okay, right.
No, I mean,
Yes.
that machine, and jokes aside, no, that machine had a very important property, namely a basic interpreter
Yes,
on it.
indeed,
So,
indeed.
what did you do with it?
You right. Well, what did you do with it?
No, what did you do with it?
What did I do with it? Many
Yes.
different things. Well, your first experiments in programming and stuff like that, right?
Like in basic.
Yes, of course, because that was the native language. Well,
Well-
not native. It was. It came pre-installed with the basic interpreter, so you would naturally write your programs in that.
Well, that basic interpreter had two important commands, namely Coke and sys, if I'm not completely mistaken.
Yes.
So that it would allow you actually to write
that's
programs also in assembler, which quite a few people did at the stage.
Well, especially if you wanted to do graphics and stuff like that. Yes, you had
Indeed.
to poke around with sprites and whatever.
Indeed, yes. And that brings us nicely
all coming
to...
back now. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's only been, 60 years or something, right? Anyway, no, you're talking about probably 80s, right?
Yeah.
It was a VIC-20.
Yes.
Like 82, maybe 81 or something like that.
Yeah, early 80s, yes.
I mean, you're
Yes,
talking about
correct.
16 kilobytes of RAM plus a 6502.
Don't forget the tape drive, yeah, and
Yes.
the 54K. No, probably 1200K modem.
Okay.
1200 pound modem, even.
But that wasn't supplied by Commodore, was it?
Yeah.
Was it? Here in the UK, okay.
Was it? Was the modem coming on? Anyway, the tape drive was clearly, but yeah.
And there was also a floppy drive. It was called
Floppy drive,
1540.
no.
It was called 1541 for the VIC-64, but I'm not too sure what for the VIC-20.
I couldn't afford a floppy drive, yeah.
Maybe that was a
Just tapes,
1540 or something. Details may not be in the show notes, exactly.
See, the good thing about tapes was that you could also use it for music. It's the same medium
Yes.
nowadays nowadays we don't have any media anymore, but
True.
we just have
But
to
going back
use
to the
sticks.
original
Original question.
Yes, compiler.
Topic. Yes, compiler. Yes. Yeah.
That was an interpreter, so
Yes.
you would type in lines of basic code, and then some piece of software would interpret the whole thing.
And do something. Yes.
Exactly, or not, depending.
Depending on how good you code.
Exactly.
Coding is. Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is basically you need something if you're using a high-level programming language like, I'm almost going to say assembler, but no, it's of course, basic, to turn that actually into something that a computer can understand, which is at the end of the day something very close to assembly, namely machine code.
Something close to the actual
Hardware.
yes.
Exactly. So
Sure.
code that knows how to get stuff into registers, how to do computations, all the rest of it.
Well, computations, your ands and your nands and all that kind of stuff.
Binary operations and simple
Do
additions
stuff
as
in
an
registers, yeah.
exactly
yeah.
as an integer addition,
Yep.
addition, stuff like that.
Yep.
So
Yep. Okay.
so you need a piece of software basically, and of course not. I mean, when computers were first invented, that was shortly after Martin bought his first car.
No, it wasn't. It was way before that.
No, you essentially you had either pepper cards or actually switches where you could turn
Punch cards.
where you could turn switches, and then basically that
Oh, right.
would be a binary code
yeah.
that the machine could execute. But shortly afterwards came paper tapes and punch cards, of course. Yes.
Well, I mean, yeah, without going too much into the history of computing, you could argue that an abacus is a
True.
computing device, right? Anyway,
That was actually before Martin bought his
Yes.
first car.
Anyway, going back to the point of the compiler.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're not going back that far in time. Yes.
I mean, so, and at some stage around the time when Martin bought his first car, symbolic as in kind of high-level programming language were invented. The likes of COBOL, the likes of Fortran, the likes of BASIC,
Pascal. Okay, Pascal language. Yes.
Exactly. So one important trait or feature of these programming languages would be that they weren't close to the machine in terms of they were symbolic. COBOL, I think, stands for common business
The B is with business, yeah. Alpha language, object language.
object language.
Business object language? Maybe.
Details may be in the show notes.
I have never used it, so I couldn't really comment. Yeah.
And of course, Fortran stands for Formula Translator, because that's essentially what Fortran was in these days.
So why did we have these higher level languages?
Because not everybody speaks assembler, right?
Yes.
They're easier to pick up, they're easier to learn, and they're easier to program.
Yes. Okay. That's a good answer. Well done.
Very, very good. No, of course, the idea was actually to introduce levels of extraction that would make it easier for people to write software. At the same time, you would have to have some...
Easier and higher quality in terms of, because clearly assembler, it takes a different level of code control, or let's say it's easier to introduce errors into.
Indeed. So you would lower the technical depth. Not depth, but depth. No, you would keep you would increase the level of technical depth. Yes, exactly, with assembler. But the idea was, of course, to lower the technical depth, as in the amount of work that you have to do if you want to maintain a code base, which is normally known as technical depth. So if you want to decrease that, you want to move away from the pure machine level. And that's exactly why, well, that was one of the main reasons, let's put it this way, why high-level, more symbolic programming languages like the ones we just discussed were invented. Needless to say, time didn't stop there. Afterwards, more object-oriented languages entered the scene, the likes of Smalltalk,
yes.
The likes of Module 2 was more like abstract data types, right?
Module 2 was more Pascal, right? It's the same kind of functional language type.
Yeah, as in kind of abstract data types.
Yeah.
But the likes of what I was thinking about.
Anyway, doesn't matter. It does. I want to know where it is now.
And needless to say, some other programming languages were their first were invented along the same timelines, like functional programming language like Lisp and so forth, back in the 60s.
Yes.
All of these things required a piece of software that would take that programming language then and transformed it in a way that a machine could understand.
Yeah.
Hence, the notion of a compiler or interpreter was born. Now, Martin, what's the difference between a compiler and an interpreter?
Right. The compiler makes it into machine executable code, whereas your interpreter does it as the command is executed. So basically, you write your code, compile the stuff, makes it into a machine executable level of code, whereas interpreter, it's line by line is interpreted, right, to give you an immediate answer. Clearly, the advantage of a compiled language is that you have your compiler does your first bit of checking, whereas if you with an interpreted language, that happens line by line during execution rather than at compile time.
So would you reckon that Python would be an interpreter language or compiled language or something in between? I'm just naming one example now.
Yeah, well, Python's a very popular language.
Indeed. Gidi, if you're listening, send us money. No, I'm joking.
And if you found the time to speak to us, that would also be great. Now that retirement may be finally no longer the case.
He's working at Microsoft.
Yes.
No, so.
He briefly retired, and then he said he had no time because he was retired. So he must now he's working. He must have lots of time. Anyway, I don't know.
Well, back to the question, Martin. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Python would normally be considered an interpreted language, right? But there are certain cases where you could argue another way.
Indeed. So Martin had a very interesting point. The way rather Martin described the whole thing was valid. I would say I'd probably be shot by some language purists or something about not even 15, 20 years, but Python was invented in the early 90s. So you're looking at more like the 80s or 70s. But after that, the picture became a little bit blurry, because if you take a look at Python, and that goes for Python 1, Python 2, Python 3, as in all along the way, the Python interpreter takes, for want of a better expression, takes source code, transforms it into something called an abstract syntax tree. We will explain what that is in a minute. Then the interpreter does, or the Python language system, let's put it this way, or execution system, does something with that abstract syntax tree and arrives at something that is then interpreted, and hence probably the word interpreter is still correct, by a virtual machine. And the virtual machine, of course, being a piece of software that is executed on the actual hardware operating system, but takes a machine-independent representation of a program and simply executes that.
Like a JVM.
Like a JVM, exactly, because that's exactly what Java, what a Java compiler does. It takes a Java program, transforms it into something that a JVM, a Java virtual machine, can execute, and then it simply hands that off to...
Java bytecode. No?
Java bytecode, exactly.
Yes. We come back to this point in a minute. I just wanted to ask you about another thing on languages, which is whatever happens to 4GL languages.
I think they're dead.
Yes.
Together with this whole SQL swindle.
Well, SQL swindle is definitely not dead, unlike the NoSQL swindle. But
I see.
No, but it...
no, I mean, what exactly do you mean by fourth generation language?
Well, fourth generation language is a language that generates code rather than just...
Like a meta thing, okay.
Yes, which was
an example
all rather handy, really.
An example would be?
Well, with some of my background was spent using Oracle software. And you could consider something like an Oracle Forms to be a 4GL language because it generated a 3GL program from higher level inputs. Let's put it that way. So,
are they still around?
And so the difference is that nowadays everything is done with libraries, which is kind of fine. You can get functionality out of languages, but it's not. You're not generating code as such, unless you're obviously using something like GPT. You can also write programs, but that's a different matter. Anyway, yeah, it seemed it was a bit of a step backwards when all that disappeared, in my opinion, because it was, yes, you may not be getting the most optimum executable code, but from a pure program generation writing point of view, it was dead handy and consistent. Oh yes, good spot.
Yes, so well spotted, Martin, with regards to that fourth generation language. But I think they have fallen a little bit by the wayside because
they have, yes.
I can't recall any recent project using an approach like that, where it needs not obviously in terms of maybe under the hood, but that's. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, okay, we're coming on to this subject a bit later on, but you could kind of argue that a JIT has the same concept. No?
We'll come to that in a moment, I suppose.
Yeah, let's come to that in a moment. Okay. Yeah. So, what are these stages in the compiling?
Exactly. So,
did we cover the interpretation versus compiler?
Well, we did. Yes,
we did. I think we did. Yes. Unless you want to add anything.
So, there's not much
let's talk about the stages.
There's not much of a difference if you take a look at the modern ecosystem of languages, like the Swifts, the Pythons, the Rubies, the Perls, the Cs, C++s, the Rusts of the world. But we're going to get there in a minute.
Java,
I specifically exclude Java because... well, let's not go down there. We come back to Java when we discuss GITs.
We should get some Java people on the podcast.
Why? Man, that cannot be a serious remark, right?
Oh, okay, yes.
Okay, going back to the stages, yes.
Stages,
yes, indeed. An abstract syntax tree is essentially the first representation that you have. So, a first stage normally called a scanner breaks a programming language down to symbols, and then a parser checks these symbols for syntactic correctness.
Okay.
That's what a parser does. Depending on a particular language, you get a so-called AST, also known as abstract syntax tree, for most of the programming languages as part of this process. Now, as the name suggests, it's essentially a tree representation of your program. The beauty about that is actually it's program language independent, and this is actually something that you see
if you standard among languages.
More or less, yes.
Okay,
I mean, the GNU compiler collection and, for example, LLVM, as in the low-level virtual machine, does that sort of thing.
Okay.
So they take the programming. They have something called programming-specific front ends that can take C, C++,
Yeah, okay.
Rust,
Oh,
even Java, and perform that transformation on this code, and then arriving at an AST that is more or less programming language independent.
okay.
And then some magic takes this AST, does an awful lot of things with it, and arrives at something that is still machine independent, but can be transformed into machine code very easily.
That sounds very sensible.
Because that would allow you to perform independent machine independent optimizations on that code.
Yes, before you get to the machine speed.
Exactly. For example, loop unrolling. As in, the compiler would take a look at if a compiler can do that, would take a look at the structure of a loop and then take an educated guess of whether it would make sense not to compile or to translate the loop structure, but rather roll out the loop. In terms of take the code that is inside the loop and then basically concatenate that as a sequence, rather than kind of compiling a loop structure with jumps and stuff.
Right. Interesting.
That's actually what you do when you take when you do that kind of step between AST and a machine independent representation, also known as an IR, as an independent or machine independent representation of a program.
Okay.
And then the next step would actually take this machine independent representation and does another translation into machine code, which would then arrive at something called object code, which essentially is a sequence of assembler statements.
.o file in
.o files, and then which a linker then can take and bind these object files to a program, and also libraries and stuff. But the beauty about this is actually that most of the frameworks, and GNU is probably the best example for this, arrive at an assembler representation after the translation from the machine independent code before they generate the object code. Because if you, for example, invoke GCC with capital S, it takes your C code and basically produces assembler code. So that allows you actually to see what a compiler does, especially with different optimization steps based on your program code and how it arrives at assembler.
Yes. You would then clearly also have to process all this assembler. You wanted to know the difference, but yeah.
Well, that's exactly where an assembler comes into play.
So no. I mean, if yes, the assembler output, you would then. Why would you need it? Right. This is my point. If you're gonna look at different strategies when you compile something, look at the assembler that's produced, then that takes a lot of effort.
If you want to do your own magic on the generated assembler code, for example.
Yeah. Yes.
Or if you want to change something before the machine code is generated, just in case. If you want to, for example, inject your own malware into a program. No, I'm just naming one example here. Anyway, okay. So these are the general steps, and they do not change kind of between the different technology stacks. Whether it's the GNU compiler connection, also known as GCC, or LLVM, that is used as a compiler backend for quite a few projects. Swift and Rust probably being the best examples here.
Well, not the best. There are some.
Are the most prominent? Or...
Hey, you forgot about Zig.
Zig, yes.
And Lua. And
Lawrence, if you're listening, Zig is one of them.
Scala. Yes. Ruby. Yes.
No, Ruby is actually no. Is it? Okay. I only know Ruby like that you call something like an interpreter language. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I mean,
it's a fairly recent development.
Okay.
Oh, they have an ahead of time compiler. Wow. Okay.
No, I mean the point that Martin is making, and rightly so, is that that this ecosystem is somewhat fluent. Because, for example, if you're just sticking to Python as the best example, you have Cython, you have MyPy, if I'm completely mistaken, and you have PyPy that take Python code and produce something that is very close to actually executable machine code. Whereas the standard Python interpreter called CPython simply performs these steps that I just outlined initially, as in taking the stuff, transforming it into an ASD, but it stops at the VM level in terms of it produces bytecode that can be executed by the virtual machine that is part of the CPython reference implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all there. And that's all there's to it. No, it's not, because there's a little bit more to it. But Martin already mentioned GITs as in just-in-time compilation.
Well, I mean, you mentioned LLVM and GCC. What is why are these two in existence, and do we know? Or
Yes, it's the general concept of open source, right?
So it's like let's do it differently and
exactly. No, I mean, okay, a little bit of history.
Sorry, yeah.
A little bit of history.
Yeah.
GNU, I think.
Why not have two versions of CentOS? Yeah. Sorry.
Almost, yes.
Carry on.
Now going back to history, I think the GNU compiler collection was, or the first step being the C compiler, was invented. Details will be in the show notes. Early 80s, maybe late 70s.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So the Free Software Foundation, as in the GNU project, needed a C compiler for their then anticipated operating system, and they chose C because C at the time was the language that was used to implement something called Unix. As in
That's
a program,
yeah,
yes.
it was. Yeah, as you said, it was the first.
As in the programming language that is close to the machine, but does have something called, for example, typing, where that allowed you to do machine-level programming, but still using a high-level language. So they were looking for a compiler. Somebody wrote it, and then at some stage, more requirements came up with regards to supporting different programming languages, and so the team sat down and re-engineered the stack to some extent in terms of kind of implemented the architecture that I described on a high level, and hence something called the GNU compiler collection was born. But essentially,
which languages is that support?
At the moment, it supports Pascal, Java, I think even Rust these days, certainly C, C++, Objective-C, and some other languages. That were tacked on, for want of a better expression, over time.
Okay.
Because initially we are talking about the C compiler.
Yes, of course.
So in contrast to this, projects like LLVM as a low-level virtual machine, again, details will be in the show notes, did it differently. LLVM was conceived as an architecture to have, from day one, different programming-based front ends or programming language-specific front ends defined for it. So
I see it.
Right from day one, you could get LLVM together with CLang, as in the GCC, as in the GNU compiler, C compiler equivalent, and CLang++, with it. And it's in contrast to the then existing implementations of the GNU framework. It was quite modular. That's precisely also, that was the main reason why projects like Swift and other programming languages that were arriving at that stage on the market chose LLVM as their compiler backend architecture.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Rust probably being the best example. Rust having been invented late teens, as in 2009, 2010, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think it was originally started as a private project, right? In
Mozilla, yes.
Yeah.
But they chose LLVM from day one to as the compiler framework for their programming language, because all they had to do is they had to write a front end that would be able to parse Rust into an abstract syntax tree, and then then LLVM would take care of the rest, including the generation of highly optimized machine code.
It's a good choice. Yeah, sensible. Probably easier to implement than doing it through GCC. Yeah, I would imagine.
Because, as I said, the approach was a different one, because it was aimed at modularity
from the start. Yeah.
And as a back end exactly for compiler development right from day one.
Okay. So, as a framework that is, well, has been complete for some time, right? It's mainly people adding languages to it? Is the project also being further optimized that you know of? Or?
LVM, yes, it's still under active development, but it's quite stable. But the thing is basically, and you'd see, and yes, I'm using Rust as another example now. Languages are, how can I put this, evolving creatures. So, for example, with Python, you have the PEPs, the Python enhancement proposals.
Mm-hmm.
Rust has something called RFCs, request for comments. This is how you evolve a language over time. So you start out, for example, with Rust, you start out with a strictly typed system-level programming language that has a couple of features, for example, memory management, all the rest of it, that is somewhat dissimilar to other approaches. But similar to other languages, Rust did evolve. So from day one, it supported something called abstract data types, but now the community is thinking about full-blown object orientation, including inheritance, polymorphism, and other features that normally OOPLs as an object-oriented programming languages bring along. Needless to say, this development process has an impact on the front end of a programming language.
Yes, on the back end.
Of a compiler framework, exactly. So what you have to do is you have to modify, or you have to improve, you have to implement, rather. You have to implement these new features in the language-specific front end.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the reason. And that's exactly the reason why you have to align the compiler front-end development with your language, with the accepted language proposals. The beauty is that once you have the AST, once you have the machine-independent representation in place, that can pretty much stay the same. Maybe apart from a few optimizations and all the rest of it, but it's in comparison to the development effort you have to put into the front end, that's quite minimal.
Makes sense.
Unless you want to go for things like just-in-time compilation.
Aha. Do tell.
What is GIT exactly, Martin?
Just in time, yes.
Yes.
Well, it's basically compiling the code at runtime, really.
Normally, it's used within context of VMs, right?
No, it's also part of certain pieces of software. Let's say you have a if we take a SQL database as an example, you could interpret the piece of SQL and execute your fixed routines, or you could compile your SQL into some more optimized code. So you're kind of following a more flexible path that is potentially also faster. Well, potentially also faster. That's the main objective.
I mean, I came across GITs in the late 90s when I took a closer look at something called Java.
Aha.
Because Java at that stage, and to some extent, I think it's
not
still
the coffee.
not the coffee, but rather programming language. Exactly. I mean, no jokes aside, Java is probably still the most prominent programming language in large enterprises if it comes down to non-mainframe environments.
Yes.
The likes of the SAPs of the world and that sort of thing. So Java, as probably most of our listeners know, is actually a virtual machine based approach. So Java compiler takes Java code and transforms it into something a VM can understand as a virtual machine. So this is normally known as Java bytecode. Exactly. So then GITs like Hotspot and other approaches took this virtual machine code and actually translated that into machine code as an executable code for processor on the fly. Hence this name GIT, just-in-time compilation, as in you take a piece of VM code and transform this into real assembler in terms of object code that the CPU can understand. Probably significantly gaining performance with that generated machine code. Exactly, yes.
Yes, Hotspot, yes. Blimey. Well, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, you're talking late 90s, I think. I think that's a Sun. No, that's an IBM.
No, it was Sun.
Sun. Okay.
Yeah.
Sun, of course, having done the reference implementation for Java long ago.
Of course, yeah. What happened to Sun anyway?
Quite some obscure database vendor bought them about 15 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And for some reason, this database vendor is still around, but Sun isn't.
Yeah. Well, they also used to make quite a good operating system, in fact. But anyway, we digress.
The database vendor? I can't.
No, Sun.
Sun, yes, of course.
Yes,
SunOS.
Yes.
Or Solaris, it was later known.
Yes.
But what happened?
What happened? Well, after they...
Real technology took over? Like the BSDs and the Linuxes of the world?
Well, it was a commercial technology, right? So...
Well,
yes.
You still have... What's the name of the project? You still have... No, it's not called Open Solaris. It's called Illumos or something like that, right? So, Oracle open sourced this quite a few years back.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And it used to be Open Solaris and it's now called Illuminos or something.
Okay. Does anybody use it?
I know at least 2 people, yes. Maybe 3.
You should get them on the show.
We should, yes. As an example for some old legacy technology.
Well, you say legacy. I wouldn't call it legacy. It was a very damn good operating system.
Nobody's disputing that, but who uses it these days?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if
some...
that's what your definition of legacy is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, apart maybe from a few people still running kind of ancient databases in their kind of cellar or attic or whatever. I don't know.
No, I came across a...
I mean, you used to work for Oracle, no?
Yeah, I did a long time ago. But,
exactly. And we don't want to talk about this, right? No,
well,
that's okay.
Talk about it's not related to compilers, but I actually came across someone who's still running Solaris in production the other day, which surprised me as well.
I mean, some banks that I used to know use it.
Yeah,
but
anyway.
Slowly replacing that with newer technology. Let's put it this way.
Okay. Yes, going back to compilers.
Yes.
Did we cover the whole... Okay, if we go back to... If we summarize, then...
It's that time of the day again. Fair enough.
Time of day for
summary.
Well, it's always good to... Unless there's something else that you...
No, I'm fine.
I was going to summarize to see if we missed anything.
Fair enough. Please go ahead, by all means.
Yeah, so we have discussed interpreted versus compiled, right? And its advantages. We talked about ASTs. We talked about...
Correct.
LVM being the more modern framework for languages to plug into is probably not the right word, but to develop against. Yeah. Talk about stages of compiling. We talk about linking
briefly.
Okay. Do tell more about linking. Why do we link stuff?
Because we want to get an executor that we can throw at a machine.
So what are we linking? For those not familiar with...
Exactly. The following technology excerpt is aimed at people who cannot go to sleep. So if you are listening, lying in your bed and you have insomnia or something like this, as in you cannot really get to sleep,
I'm sure you can
please
do this
continue
in
listening.
2 sentences.
That's the problem. I can't. It's going to really about 25 or something. If you have fallen asleep, please just forward to the boxes. If you're so inclined.
We'll probably rewind, actually.
Anyway, linking comes in handy because normally you have... It goes on actually to structuring your source code. Because what you normally would do in a modern programming language, like Rust, you would have modules, or you would have libraries rather. These libraries would consist
nothing
of...
to do with modern. It's been around for ages.
Rust. No.
No, not Rust. Modules and
sorry, yes.
libraries.
I'm just using Rust as one example. So other languages have similar concepts. So you have libraries. These libraries consist of modules. These modules consist of classes, to use an object-oriented term. These classes consist of member functions and so forth. So it's essentially a structuring approach, including namespace and all the rest of it. These libraries typically produce independently compiled object files. But the thing is, of course, if you want to put them all together, you need a piece of software that can take all these object files, possibly also external, as in third-party libraries, and produce something that a computer can execute.
Yeah.
Or JVM, for that matter.
Yeah, so what we're saying is...
Or VM, sorry.
We're taking, rather than writing all the code ourselves in one executable, we make use of libraries and pull that code in at linking stage.
Which also helps with the reuse of software, because essentially this is what not just object orientation, but generally open source software is all about at some stage anyway. Because
it's software,
yes,
software,
yes,
general, yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
And the linker, of course, helps with that. It also has some other features like producing code that is location independent and some other stuff. But as I said, this is probably time for an insomnia. This is probably food for an insomnia period. Yes,
Okay.
Where you cannot really get to sleep but want to.
All right. Okay, final question then. Are LLVM and GCC the only frameworks that do this kind of stepped approach?
No, there's many more.
Many more?
Many more.
Like
the Java architectures or frameworks of the world.
That's a single language scenario.
No.
I mean, no. Java is a single.
I mean, you can get a whole slew of, for example, of programming language that can be executed by JVM these days.
Okay. Like
Jython?
How much?
Iron something? Just links are in the show notes. There is a host of programming language actually that can be translated into Java bytecode. Yes.
Okay.
I think Jython is the best example in the Python world.
Right.
If I'm not completely mistaken.
J for Java, presumably. Yeah. What a strange thing to do. Okay.
You have other stacks like what's it called? Common Language Interface (CLI), done by a company called Microsoft.
I guess the advantage of
are two languages. I mean,
okay.
it's the same
advantage.
concept. Yes.
Yeah, you've got machine independent language too.
Which is strange given the fact that Microsoft used to be in bed with Intel.
Did they?
Yes. I mean, that was the Wintel cartel,
no? Making their own chips now as well? What?
But that's a recent addition, no?
What, Microsoft?
No, making their own chips.
Well, this is my question. Are Microsoft making their own chips as well now?
No, they have Intel for that.
Okay, so...
I mean, that was the cozy alliance, no? You had Microsoft for the operating system.
Well, not just Microsoft. I mean,
and
everybody used
Intel for the hardware.
For the hardware. Really?
But I mean, if you bought any computer that had an Intel processor done by any big manufacturer, Dell, Compaq, you name it, a certain portion of the revenue would go to Microsoft.
Really?
Because that was the so-called Windows tax, yes.
Oh, okay.
Because normally these machines would be sold with Microsoft installed.
You mean end-user machines, right?
Or enterprise desktops, you name them. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, not your servers. Yeah, okay.
You could get servers with Windows pre-installed too.
Yes, but it wouldn't be a standard.
Well, that would depend on the environment.
Like on end-user machines, Windows is, yeah. Okay.
So in that case, yes, you would have Windows mostly running on Intel machines. So, but Microsoft thought it would be a good idea to have a virtual machine architecture in place anyway. So they came up with this CLI approach where C# compiles to, where F# compiles to, and some other languages.
Okay,
but same approach.
Yes, slightly non-open source related, but. Unless they're open sources, are they open sources?
Mono? Mono rings a bell?
Dunno.
It takes Microsoft bytecode and is able to execute that on Linux and other operating systems.
Okay.
And if I'm not completely mistaken, links may have been in the show notes.
I'm not familiar with the Microsoft scene, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. If I'm not completely mistaken, Microsoft supported Mono. Because they thought at the time...
sponsored by Microsoft.
Yes. Because at the time they thought that would be their gateway into the then Linux / open source server-based world. So they contributed some IPs, or some IP rather, to that stack. And one of the core devs, I think, used to work for Microsoft.
Okay. Doesn't sound like a huge success.
I mean, it takes your legacy applications written in C# and allows you, with little or no modifications, to execute it on a Linux machine, which some people may find handy.
I don't know any such people, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. Yeah,
exactly. You see, Martin, same goes for SQL, right?
I know people who use SQL. Yes. Many of them.
I used to too, but apparently they all have disappeared apart from you. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Just because you are retired doesn't mean I don't speak to anybody anymore. Doesn't mean they're no longer there. Anyway,
yes, SQL may exist in certain isolated parts of the empire. Yes. To keep Martin at bay. Anyway,
well, no, you say this. I think Postgres overtook MongoDB in the popularity stakes last year. So there you go. Goodbye, NoSQL. Your day is over.
I wouldn't go that far now. No, people, if you're listening, your investment in NoSQL technology is safe. Don't worry about it.
Ooh, don't take his advice too seriously. We don't offer any investment advice.
No, we do not. We do not. No.
Even if we did, we wouldn't go for that.
Would we not? No. Okay. This is coming from somebody who did his first steps about 50 years ago in a program language called Structured Query Language, also known as SQL. But it's been a while.
It's not that long ago. Yeah.
49? Fair enough. Time for the POXes.
POXes. Ooh, okay.
Do you have a POX?
Do I have a POX? I usually do.
Unless we need to cover more about legacy technology. Like SQL. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I see. POXes, yes.
POXes.
Why don't you go ahead with the POXes?
My POX of the week is actually a TV series called Clio. Details will, of course, be in the show notes. It's an action mini-series, for want of a better expression, about an East German agent, for want of a better explanation.
Agent as in...
Yeah, member of the Stasi, as in Ministerium für Staatssicherheit, Ministry of State Security, back in the GDR days.
German Gestapo.
Something like that, yeah.
East German, yes.
Yeah. Of the GDR, and... The premise is it takes place just before the reunification, kind of late 80s, early 90s, and the shenanigans that she encounters after the reunification and the things that happened afterwards. I won't give away too much now. If you're into a mixture of
German.
No, you get it on Netflix. I think it's
but who Netflix?
I think it's Netflix, but
who produced this?
Do not know.
Okay,
Netflix, I think.
Right. Okay, so it's not a German.
No, I don't know. You can get it in English. You can get it in German. If you're looking for something on the funnier side, with a dash of violence thrown in, that's your TV series.
Oh, is it not Swedish? No, this is.
No, it's not. But I'm sure you can get it.
Clio. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I'm sure you can get it subtitled.
Okay.
What's your POX then, Martin?
My POX. My POX. Yes. Well, my POX is a book.
Like these ancient things, hardcover and kind of with paper.
Actually, I don't know if it's a hardcover. It hasn't arrived yet, but I'm looking forward to this book. So.
Okay. Any more details?
Well, you know the book you read it already. So.
Well, I think we had this actually as a POX.
Did we?
Yes.
We must cut this out now.
Yes, we will.
Did you have it as a POX?
I think so.
Oh, I don't know. You could be. Well, you will know better than I do because I haven't read it.
Well, I mentioned that, yes. About half a year ago or something.
Okay. Oh, that's a shame.
And rolling once again?
I mean, rolling again.
Okay.
I was looking forward to that one.
Yeah, but what's your POX to the Martin?
My POX is a non-TV related.
For a change.
For a change, yes.
For a change.
Yes. It is in fact. Yes, there we go. It is in fact a small brewery in Cornwall.
Can we give away any names or more details?
We could do if they sponsored us.
The email address unknownbrewery is sponsored at linuxinlaws.eu.
No, they're called Doom Bar, and it's been my favorite for
I see.
favorite. Well, my go-to.
They do what in terms of
amber ale?
amber ale.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I see.
Amber as in the color, yeah. As opposed to IPAs, which are usually paler and yellow.
And
less-
these
less-
amber ales are not as strongly hopped as the IPAs or real pale ales. Or...
Well, they are. I don't think the hoppiness is not necessarily directly related to color.
True, very true.
You can get some very pale IPAs that are very hoppy. In fact, hops are, when they are harvested, are actually green anyway.
Correct.
But then
the color in the beer basically comes from the degree of roasting that the malt has enjoyed. Yes, correct.
yes. I used to live in a place where lots of hops were grown and processed, so you could smell it quite a lot. Anyway, this is if you're on that subject, there aren't that many. This year might be a bad year for beer because not many hops were grown due to the drought. So you heard it here first. Buy your beer now before it runs out.
Okay, fair enough. Or just drink beer without hops. or very kind of lowly hopped beer.
Yes. Well, it's a kind of a main ingredient for many beers, right?
Well, it depends.
Well,
I mean,
not over here.
Well, in England, but
I mean, yes, in Germany they make this lager stuff, right?
yeah, and Kölsch and
how much?
Kölsch.
What is that?
That is a beer local to Cologne.
Ah, okay.
That would have a very low hop content either. As in also.
I mean, most German beers have a low hop content now.
That depends on beer. I mean,
But in general, the German beer
some
has
of
not
the
many...
some of the pilsners are
Really?
hop more. Yes,
Okay.
the likes of Jever and stuff.
How much?
The likes of Jever. It's strongly hop pils.
Okay.
It's quite popular in the northern part of the country.
Okay.
And
That explains it.
Yes.
I haven't frequented the northern part of Germany very often, if at all, even.
And I mean, if you take a look at your ordinary wheat beer, there's not much hops in it either. So
No, it's mainly grain, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so name a hoppy German beer,
Jever.
which I've not heard of.
That's a pils. That's a pils I just mentioned.
How do you even... Okay, fine. We'll talk about that later.
Or you can get pretty good German IPAs too, the likes of Brüllo, Berlin Microbrewery,
Oh, very nice.
Hopfenstopfer, Mainz-based outfit, if I'm completely mistaken. I think you tried one. Didn't you try one while you were in Germany?
Yeah, we had Erdinger, I think. Didn't we? Yeah.
Can't recall. Next time you're around, you're gonna try one.
Okay.
It's a small craft beer brewery, but they do really good IPAs.
Okay. IPA is standing for...
Indian Pale Ales.
Okay, but this is not a beer podcast.
Unfortunately, it isn't.
We could do an episode about beer. Actually,
Yes. If you're
interested in...
Exactly, please send mail to feedback@linuxinlaws.eu.
Not sure how we can put an open source angle in that one.
We'll find some way or another. We always do. No worries.
Indeed.
LBW comes to mind. Linux Bierwanderung.
What happened with that?
I fell by the wayside due to pandemic reasons, I suppose.
Is it no longer going?
It's all virtual these days, yeah.
How can you do a beer wandering virtual?
Don't ask me, I didn't participate.
That makes no sense.
It doesn't, no.
No.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay. So if you,
Yes.
people, if you want to have a special on beers, just send the mail. And with that, thank you for listening, and
Thank
goodbye.
you.
This is the Linux in-laws.
You come for the knowledge.
But stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license, type Attribution Share Alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for their song Solid Market, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under CC at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts.